Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new teen therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David.
The fellow from Guatemala told me not to do that anymore, so I will do a more, hello, Rhonda.
Oh, David, by the way, hello. And we have a special guest today. David, I interrupted you.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
We have Michael Greenwald, who was here last week, and he's kindly enough to stay for another podcast episode, this time with comments. Feel free to jump in anytime you want, Michael.
Sure.
And so this is an Ask David episode, and it is episode 179. I think I said that. And we're going to start off with a really sweet endorsement from someone who listens all the way from Chile. And his name is Fernando, and he says, "Hi, Dr. Burns. How are you doing? I hope all is well with you. I am very glad to have the opportunity to contact you. My name is Fernando, and I am from Chile. I came about you by hearing a TED Talk early this year. It had a profound effect on me, and I decided to buy your books, especially interested in When Panic Attacks. I had a life event that changed things forever in my life about 4.5 years ago. My brother, aged 40, died of a sudden heart attack, leaving one 3-year-old son and an unborn son and his wife and the rest of our small family. He was my only brother. It was a major seismic event in our lives until today, the saddest experience of my life. From that point onwards, I started developing anxiety like never before and panic attacks. The approach of the psychiatric therapist here was the traditional one: clonazepam and antidepressants. Luckily, my body does not tolerate very well the antidepressants, so that pushed me to seek alternative therapies and other ways to cope with my anxiety. In that sense, your books, podcast, videos, and tools for depression and anxiety have been a great relief and source of great growth for myself. It is a great joy to hear your podcast every week with Fabrice and Rhonda. Very funny at times, too. Well, I just wanted to drop an email and thank you for your great work. If you ever happen to be in Chile, please let me know, and I will be delighted to be your host. Cheers, Fernando."
Fernando, well, thank you so much, Fernando. That's such a thoughtful note, and I for one, appreciate it tremendously, and I suspect you do too, Rhonda.
I know, it's so sad to hear what he went through.
Yeah.
It must be really inspiring for you that your books and things that you've written about in these podcasts.
Well, I think it's inspiring for both of us that we're right now projecting all over the world and touching base with our wonderful audience who have so many, I think, faithful and loyal and excited people. It's moving it's humbling that we have this opportunity to just talk and have so many people listen, and we appreciate the emails we get from all of you. Well, not necessarily from all of you. Occasionally we get kind of a irritating,
right?
Burn sucks or something like that. But that's good too, because then we learn from criticism, and that's what we're trying to teach you folks to do too.
Yeah. We actually talked about that on the podcast. Do you only learn from going through pain?
Yeah.
Experiences?
Yeah, that's what you were talking about last week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
so today we're doing some Ask Davids. Are you ready for me to ask you?
Yes, I just want to remind people
yes.
On May 17th, so if you're a therapist or an interested general citizen, Jill and I, Dr. Jill Levitt and I, will be giving another one-day podcast. You can tune in live streaming from anywhere in the world. Not a podcast, but a one-day workshop on the Cognitive Distortion Starter Kit. And we'll be telling you, teaching you in one day all the best tools for each of the 10 distortions. So if you're a therapist, this could be a cool thing for you, and you get continuing education credits. Or even if you're a general citizen, you might sneak in. I think they're trying to limit it to therapists.
I think so.
Personally, I would be happy for a general public. But you and I will, for the general public, will do some podcasts on the same topic as well.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, we're going to do some Ask Davids, and to read us the first one, how can I help my depressed husband who is leaving me? What an interesting question.
Yes, and this is from Sally, whose name was changed, and she says, "Hello, Dr. David. My husband is going through severe depression anxiety. He blames me frequently for all the bad decisions he's made, and he says he married the wrong woman. He regrets almost every decision he made and says he made the decision to marry me under my pressure. Our marriage of 20 years is almost leading to separation. I don't want to separate, but I don't know how I can improve the situation. He doesn't want to go to any doctor. Do you think if I decide to go to team certified therapist, they can work on me to get him out of his depression? If yes, how many sessions will it take? Sally." Oh my gosh, just reading this makes me depressed and sad for her.
Yeah.
I felt sad to read and now to hear Sally's email. The pain of being rejected or criticized by someone you love can be really, really tremendous. And it sounds too like Sally's feeling a bit desperate and panicked and willing to do anything to try to save her marriage. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sally's feeling sad and down and anxious and worried and maybe guilty, being criticized a fair amount, or maybe ashamed or inadequate or alone or lonely, or maybe humiliated too, or discouraged, frustrated, and maybe a bit angry. It sounds like Sally's in a tremendous amount of pain.
Yes, it must be a difficult situation to live in, worrying about her husband going through severe depressions, anxiety, feeling the attack of him blaming her. And then, she doesn't want to separate. It sounds like she still really loves him, and feeling rejected. But also, I appreciate that she's determined to improve the situation for the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to direct our podcast today into some things that Sally could do a little bit differently, because chasing someone who's trying to leave you is not a strategy that has much likelihood of success. But there are some things that Sally could do. But just to be clear, we don't want to put all of the pressure on Sally, that it's all up to her to change this situation. And there might be something to be said for the two of them to get some couples counseling together to try to improve the communication. I wouldn't want to press that too far, though, because to make couples therapy work, it takes two people who are heavily committed to the relationship. And it sounds like he's trying to get out of the relationship, and so Sally might have a better chance by changing the way she communicates with him.
Right, and maybe perhaps this might be magical thinking on my part, but perhaps if she changed the way that she spoke with him and related to him, it might increase his motivation to work on the relationship and to be motivated to attend couples counseling.
Yeah, in addition to the things that we do to show how she can respond to his criticisms, I recall in one of my books, I did have some strategies for how rejected, abused, and abandoned women can turn the tables on the man who's treating them shabbily. That might have been in my first book, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy, or it might have been in Intimate Connections. But the whole idea behind it, before we go into what we're going to teach Sally, hopefully in this podcast, was that to treat your husband like a rat. That was the name of the strategy, and it was based on laboratory research with rats. And what you do, you see, rather than chasing him, so let's say when the husband has left, you never approach him at all. Don't ever call him or write to him, do anything that's chasing. But he will call, from time to time, maybe at a low frequency. And when you do, you respond in a very positive way. So he'll be rewarded and say, "Oh, Al, or whatever his name is, it's so great to hear from you." Uh, and I wish I had a little bit more time to talk right now, but I'm on the way out the door.
Right.
But feel free to call anytime, because I
Yeah.
just think you're wonderful, or something like that.
Yeah. I'd
And
love to talk to you some other time, but I'm just too busy right now.
yeah, yeah, and I'm really sad because it's you're so awesome, and if you don't mean it, it will be more effective. And so I had a lot of women do this in my practice, and then at the same time, you've got to find someone else you're interested in. And the very moment you don't need him anymore or want him anymore, generally he'll come crawling back. But it's really a paradoxical strategy, and I did it with tons of women, and it was always effective. Men are not very bright, and they're really easy to manipulate if you're willing to do it. And you can also be a scientist. Every time he calls, you mark it on your calendar, just like they track rats in a laboratory experiment. And then you can get the rat to keep doing more and more if you keep rewarding it for certain kinds of behavior. So that's a kind of a fun approach to a sad situation. But now we'll show some really serious changes that Sally might want to consider in how she responds to her husband's many painful criticisms.
I've got some suggestions for you, Sally, to get some information and some approaches that I think might be helpful for you. But one of the biggest problems I see in the world when it comes to relationship problems, and this is a difficulty almost all therapists have also, but they don't realize it. And most therapists feel they're expert in listening and in communication. But a lot of people don't really know how to listen. And we get defensive when other people criticize us, and we see it as the other person's problem. So we kind of subtly blame the person who's criticizing us, and that keeps the problem alive. And although my heart goes out to you, Sally, because it must be very sad for you to feel that your husband is critical of you and wanting to leave you, I can't. My initial impression here, and Rhonda and Michael can jump on me if I'm saying the wrong thing or not saying it in the right spirit, is that when people are critical of me, the only thing that ever works is to find truth in the criticism and to encourage them to express their anger and to see the world through their eyes and to listen. And it looks like you're not doing that and don't know how to do that. And we can role play how it would work. If the first question is do you want to get closer to your husband who's leaving you? Would you like to develop a more loving, better relationship if that's possible? And then secondly, are you willing to pay the price of a better relationship with him or with anyone? And that involves the death of the ego and seeing that when the other person is criticizing you, what he or she is saying is really true. And it's even happening now. You see he says he was pressured to marry you, and can you see right now you're trying to pressure him to stay with you, and rather than listening and encouraging him to share his feelings and to see that there's a great deal of truth in what he's saying. And the only reason I'm saying this is because in my experience that there's this thing called the law of opposites. When you listen and acknowledge the truth and acknowledge the feelings of someone who's angry with you and ticked off at you and ripping into you, and if you genuinely acknowledge that what they're saying is true, it's not true anymore. And that's a paradox. But when you defend yourself and argue and try to show that somehow you're right and the other person is wrong, they believe all the more that what they're saying is true. Do you see? So and before we role play it, I'll just say, if you want to pursue this, and you may not. I find most people with troubled relationships don't want to do what they have to do to develop a more loving marriage, a more loving relationship, and you might not either. But the
Right, I had just to interrupt you for 1 second.
yeah.
So I have a client who is having a challenging relation, is in a a painful, difficult relationship, and I had this conversation with her
Oh,
about how it's time for she has to take responsibility for the relationship
yeah.
and genuinely acknowledge his feelings, and she said, I don't want to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, sadly, many people don't want to do the very thing that is necessary to do to develop loving relationships. They want to blame the other
Yeah,
person. They
because
want the other
he's all
person.
wrong, right?
Yeah, he's wrong and he should change.
And he's the one that caused all the
Yeah, yeah.
problems.
But if you wanted, I mean, the podcast on the 5 secrets of effective communication shows you how to use the disarming technique, thought empathy, feeling empathy, I feel statements, inquiry, stroking, and so forth. And they begin with number 65. And if you listen to those podcasts along with reading my book, Feeling Good Together, and doing the exercises in the book, that could be a good first start. If your husband's depressed, he might benefit from my book, Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy. If you went to a therapist, it wouldn't be for you to learn how to be a therapist and get your husband out of his depression. It would be to learn how to use these communication techniques to listen and to hear what he has to say. Whether he leaves you or not, you could be developing a much better relationship. Also, the recent Feeling Good podcast on how to help and how not to help would be crucial. You're trying to help him, which will never work, rather than changing yourself. And finally, if you want a referral, you can go to the referral page on my website, feelinggood.com, or go to the feelinggoodinstitute.com to get excellent referrals. But let's just role play a little bit how this might work. Suppose do you want to let's do a quick role play here. Do you want to be the husband or the wife here?
The wife.
The wife, and suppose I'm saying to you, I feel like I married the wrong woman.
Wow, well, it is true that we haven't gotten along for a really long time. We have trouble in our relationship. And, you have, that pains me. It hurts my feelings so much to hear that. But I heard you say you feel like you married the wrong woman, and I imagine you're feeling really, sad and let down and maybe disappointed that you've shared your life 20 years with me that has been maybe a waste. And, am I reading you right? Is that how you feel, like your life is wasted? Because I imagine you have a lot more to say about it. I'd love to hear more. Can you tell me more about what your thoughts and feelings are about our relationship? Because you really mean a lot to me, and I would love to work on our relationship, so I'd like to hear more about what you have to say.
Great. What grade do you give yourself on that?
Well, I kind of stumbled, so I give myself a B.
What grade did you give it, Michael?
Oh, probably more like an A-. There was one thing I noticed, but I thought it was beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
What did you notice?
You didn't mention that he might be feeling angry, or maybe I missed it.
Yeah, there's
Dang
one
it.
feeling that no therapist in the United States has ever mentioned and will never ever be able to mention.
Wow.
And when someone's really angry and you don't mention their anger, what will happen?
They'll just keep being angry.
Yeah.
And I'll just keep acting it out until I notice it.
Yeah, and then another thing I think you could do. It's all on a general level.
Yeah.
And I'd rather say you're saying that that you married the wrong woman, Jim, and it's painful for me to hear that because to tell you the truth, I feel like you're right. That I have really failed you. And when you've been critical of me, I've defended myself. And I can imagine how frustrated and angry you must be, and maybe even feeling lonely. And I'm wondering if you could tell me more. I haven't listened for all these years, and you're absolutely right in leaving me, because I've been like a wall, rather than opening up and hearing what you have to say. And I want you to know I'm ready to listen, and maybe you can tell me how awful it's been for you, and all the things I've done or said that really turn you off and hurt your feelings, and were painful for you. How's that?
That's really moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Why?
Because you specifically talked about what it is that she's saying his complaints are about.
Yeah.
You got really specific.
Yeah.
You're right, I've failed you.
Yeah.
It's very melting
Yeah. And then why is it we don't want to say I failed you?
because it hurts.
Yeah, and it's the death of the self. But
Yeah.
the death of the self, there's 4 deaths of the selves that are necessary to get to enlightenment. And the one in interpersonal conflict is the blaming self that has to die to find a loving relationship. Uh, uh, can we try it again?
Yes.
You want to be the woman or the man?
Well, I think I
Well,
need...
why don't you
Yeah, well, let's
be-
do Michael.
Yeah,
Let's have Michael be a role.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Who am I then?
You wanna-
to say, yeah, I married you. I married you under pressure. So you be
Sally?
the husband,
The husband? And you're
you
Sally.
want to be the wife.
Okay, sure, I'll be
Okay,
Sally.
yeah.
Sally, I want to get a divorce. I married you under pressure. You pressured me. You were never the right woman for me.
I got to say, it really hurts so much to hear you say that to me, and partly it hurts so much because it's really true. I'm realizing what you're saying to me right now is true, and it pains me to acknowledge that. But when I think back, I really did pressure you to marry me, and I think I've pressured you about many things in our marriage, and I can only imagine that's been really hard for you. I put you on the spot and pushed you into things maybe you didn't want, and maybe I wonder if it's made you frustrated with me or angry at me, and maybe it's brought you down, maybe even feeling less than, like I'm bossing you around at times, and I feel kind of ashamed that I've been mistreating you in these ways, and because I really do love you very much, and I hope we can maybe not get divorced. And I'm sure there's more that you've been thinking and feeling about how I've been pressuring you, and I'd really want to hear more about that. So maybe I can learn to do less of that.
Okay, what grade did you give yourself?
B+.
Would you give it?
Well, I'd give it an A-. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I
Yeah.
thought the inquiry could be a little bit stronger.
Yes.
But other than
Okay.
that, I loved your disarms. You did that several times. You disarmed several times, and I think that was really powerful because it's such a painful situation. So I liked that. That was really creative.
I gave it a same, B plus probably. I thought it was really good. There were a couple things I thought it could have been better. I think you continued to pressure him.
Oh,
You say, I hope we cannot get divorced, and I promise to do better.
yes.
And I would say, just delete that,
Yes.
flush it down the toilet,
Absolutely.
and let it go into the sewer.
Because that's pressure.
Yeah.
I hope we
I'm
can
hoping
stay.
we cannot. You won't. I don't want you to leave me, and I'll promise to do better.
Yeah, that's
And
pressure.
instead of promising to do better, do better.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, and do better would be to more go in the direction. Yeah, I'm so ashamed of myself that I've been trying to hang on to you, and to control you, to grab you, to pressure you. And I haven't seen it really until just recently, and I can just imagine how horrible that's been for you. And you're right. You did end up with the wrong woman, and maybe you have to leave me to find your freedom. It would break my heart because I do love you, but I want to hear now more about it, how angry and how awful and how lonely you felt, and some of the things I've done or said that have been pressurizing you. To tell me what that's been like. How's that?
Really good.
Uh-huh.
A plus. That's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And why? What's good about it?
Well, you said, well, you confronted your own fear, her fear.
Yeah.
I can understand why you have to leave me because I've been so horrible.
Yeah.
Tell me what your experience has been like. I mean,
Yeah.
just giving him that out
Yeah.
will probably allow him to get closer.
Yeah, it's a paradox.
It is,
It's
yeah.
a paradox, but again, it involves the death of the self, the death of the ego.
And that's really hard to do in the moment.
Even in role play.
Yeah.
In the role play, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to, I mean, sometimes when I'm doing a 5 Secrets, I write it out in advance and go
Yeah.
over it and
Yeah.
think about it so that I can make sure that I'm specific enough. And
Should we do one more on this, or have we done enough? I mean, this is the biggest lesson that humanity needs to learn, in my opinion, and it's really hard. In fact, I offered to do a 4-day intensive on this next summer, and neither of the sponsoring agencies was willing to do it.
oh,
So
sad.
I may have done my last intensive. I don't know.
Oh,
Both
no.
Jack Hiroshi refused up in Canada, and then Spencer Smith here with Praxis.
Well, I personally hope that's not the case, that it's your last.
Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
we can find something. But I said I want to do an all-new intensive.
Yeah.
This year's intensives were the best ever. I mean, they were out of sight, all three
Yeah.
of them. And I thought, well, I'll give people a whole new intensive. And people really need 4 days to learn how to do this. Therapists need to learn how to relate to their patients, how to relate to their loved ones, and how to treat people like this with relationship problems.
Yeah,
that
and
takes-
actually the 5 Secrets are not easy to learn.
Oh, no. It's because it involves spiritual transformation as well as learning these technical skills. So if you want David to do another intensive, maybe you could contact Praxis and Jack Hiroshi and let them know that you'd want to go to an intensive on relationship issues for how to develop loving relationships, better relationships. Therapists need it just as much as the general public.
Yeah.
But people want David to do all these tricks, these methods, and I want to give therapists what they need, not what they want. And
When we were discussing it, part of the difficulty might be that therapists don't really understand what this entails and
Yeah.
what it has to offer.
yeah,
And so that might be part of why he didn't think he could market it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's revolutionary. It's
Yeah.
life changing.
it is.
At any rate, should we do one more example of this? We're going to make this a real quick answer, but this is so important.
Yeah.
What role do you want?
Okay,
this
I'll do
time?
Sally. I'll be Sally.
And I'll be husband here.
Okay.
Could I talk to your mother, Sally?
Oh, I guess so.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to remind you that you're to blame for all the bad decisions I've made.
Wow, David, as hard as that is for me to hear and as painful that is for me to hear, I have to say, you're right. I am to blame for all of your decisions that have gone wrong in your life. And I can, I can imagine how angry you are at me and how disappointed and even hurt. And I am feeling horrible and embarrassed, and I've pressured you to do things that you didn't want to do, and you got bad results, and that affected all of us. And can you tell me more about what I've done and how I've impacted you? I haven't been a very good wife to you since I've been, creating all of this angst within you. And, you're the most important person in the world to me, and I want to make sure that I understand fully what you're going through.
Okay. What grade did you give yourself?
No, I think I did worse that time. I'd give myself a C.
C. What did you give?
I think probably a B.
A B. I thought a B. Yeah. Can you tell us, Michael, what? And this is, by the way, if you folks want to learn this, how you learn.
Excuse
You
me.
try and fail, try and fail. If you're willing to do this, you'll be able to move forward. If you're not willing to do this, things aren't going to change for you in the way you communicate with people, loved ones, and colleagues during conflict. But say what you liked and you didn't like, what worked and what didn't work.
Well, I think you were doing plenty of disarming. Although it caught me when you said, I am to blame for all of your wrong decisions. I don't know if I would have said like all of them, but still, it was definitely disarming. And you were the inquiry. There was a lot of inquiry, really wanting to. You said a couple of times, really wanting to understand more about what he's thinking and feeling. Um, I think I just sort of I got a little lost in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got lost saying it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought I want to echo what you said there. It's not true that you're to blame for all of the wrong decisions that he's made. And so when you say that, you're saying something that's not true.
Yeah, it's insincere.
Yeah, and when you disarm, you have to say something that's absolutely spot on, correct. But it was decent. It was a B, which is way better than what most people can do. Let's see if we can get it up to an A, and that's what you have to do. You just keep doing role reversals. And why don't you be the husband and you be the wife, and
Okay.
let's do it again. So
Let's do this one again because it was really hard.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Okay.
You know, Sally, you're to blame for all of my problems.
I think the way I've been treating you in this marriage, I probably am at fault for so many of your
Well, can
problems.
we just say not for all my problems, for all of the wrong decisions I've made? So we'll stick more with her script. Just repeat it again.
Okay, sorry. Sally, you're to blame for all of the wrong decisions I've made.
Well, you're right about that, and it hurts me to hear that. But I've definitely contributed so much to you making wrong decisions, and I feel really bad about that. And I'm sure that this has hurt you tremendously, and that you've probably been frustrated and maybe felt pushed down in this relationship, and maybe angry at me when I make you make the wrong decisions or bad decisions. And I do love you, and I do respect you, and it makes me even feel more ashamed that I contribute to you making bad decisions. And maybe you can tell me more about how you've been thinking and feeling. I really want to understand in the many ways I've probably contributed to you making bad decisions in your life and in our marriage, so that I need to really see what I've been doing that's been hurting you so much. Maybe you can tell me more about that.
Great. What grade do you give yourself?
B plus. Again,
Would you give it?
B plus.
I think I have a B plus, maybe
Yeah.
A minus. What did you like? What worked? What didn't work? And I hope this isn't boring to you folks, but this is how we do it. We polish the agate over and over until we get a good polish, and only then should you try to use it for real, because these techniques are powerful. And if they're not done really well, they'll backfire, and if they're done really well, they're can be magical.
Well, I loved how you said it hurts me to hear you say this. And that really rang true. If you said that to me, it would just really sink in. I like how you talked about you felt ashamed. So your I feel statements were really powerful. And you did a really great job with feeling empathy, where you acknowledged that he or me in the role of your husband felt frustrated and angry. You mentioned a couple of other feelings that I didn't write down. This is it's hard language, because when you said I said when I was doing it, I'm responsible for all your wrong decisions, and that didn't go over well. But when you said I've contributed to you making wrong decisions, I felt kind of angry that you said that.
It's defensive.
I don't know. Yeah, it was a defensive.
Yeah.
And so I would somehow ask you how would we tweak that?
Yeah.
Should we try it again?
Yeah.
You want to be
Yeah,
the wife?
I think you're now. You're Sally.
Okay. I'm the woman or the man?
Yeah, you're the woman. No. Yeah, you're Sally.
I'm Sally. Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Yeah, you're Sally. Sally, you have contributed to all the wrong decisions I've made.
No, it's you're to blame for all the wrong decisions.
Oh, I'm sorry. What am I talking about? I read the wrong. Yeah, sorry. Sally, you are to blame for all the wrong decisions I've made.
It's really painful for me to hear you say that, because we're absolutely on the same page. I agree with you 100%. I feel that I haven't supported you effectively. As who am I, Sally or him?
You're Sally.
Oh yeah, I really haven't supported you effectively in a lot of the decisions that you've been struggling with. And I can imagine that you're, on the one hand, feeling depressed and bad about yourself for decisions that haven't gone well, and also very angry with me and disappointed in me for not supporting you better and pointing you in the right direction. And it wouldn't be so painful for me if I didn't love you so much, and if it wasn't so absolutely true. And as hard as it is for me to hear you say that, I'm kind of grateful too, because maybe this would be a chance for us to talk and get on the same page, the way I've been wanting, and I know the way that you've been wanting. And with that in mind, can you tell me more? I'm ready to listen. Tell me about all the things I've done that have been screwed up and not effective and hurtful for you, and that haven't come across in a loving way. I really want to hear what you have to say, and also how awful and lonely it's been for you. How's that?
Not only do I love the words that you're using, but I like your tone of voice.
Yeah.
Your tone of voice is very reassuring and calming.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so sincere.
Yeah. And I guess the message, in a way, it's, remember we had that kind of funny podcast about opening your hands and letting go rather than chasing somebody?
Yes, and we've also talked about the music underneath what someone else is saying.
Yeah.
And he said, you're to blame, and you said, I haven't supported you effectively. So that's really what he's saying.
Yeah, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
And then also where you folks were missing a little bit is how lonely and depressed he feels.
Yeah.
It's all about anger. Well, that's good. But is he also feeling really crushed and despondent and down because of having made these bad decisions and kind of self-critical as well as being critical of her? So anyway, that's our three cents worth, and I think we're coming to the end of this podcast. We were going to do a whole bunch of Ask Davids, and this was going to be a little 5-minute one. But Sally, which isn't your real name, as much pain as you're in, and as how awful this is for you, I think this is a problem that on some level, millions, if not tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people can. Well, we don't have that many podcast fans, but like most people listening to the podcast can identify with loved ones or colleagues, or if you're a therapist, patients, just criticizing you in ways that put you on the defensive, and you think, well, what's wrong with that other person? And this is a totally different way of looking at it, which is seeing the truth, hearing the music and the criticism, and opening up. And hearing what they have to say and inviting them to deeper intimacy.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to listen to this podcast over and over again because I want to really have it sink in, the advice and the teaching that you're giving, David.
Yeah.
And I would kind of encourage Sally and others to listen to it again and again too, because you could hear 3 or 4 different versions, what worked, what didn't work, and then put it in your own words.
Yeah. And while it's so challenging to do, I think the power this would have to prevent an escalation with a couple, right in that moment, to go this direction of the disarming and the other part, the empathy part of it, instead of the defensiveness or counterattacking, would be incredibly helpful to couples, or really any relationship.
Yeah.
But in this context, it's a marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know I'm going to drive you out to the airport to fly back to the charming Burbank airport.
Yes.
Bob Hope Airport. And it's been wonderful having you, Michael. You came up yesterday, Saturday, and we went out to dinner last night. You slept over here. And then we went with you, Rhonda, on this fabulous hike today. And I just thought jaw-dropping work with a couple of the people who attended that. That was great. And then we had a chance to eat some bagels and lox, a good old Scandinavian treat, and then do the podcast with you, and then the second podcast. And I know one thing we've talked about that is not materialized whatsoever, but I guess you've been thinking about maybe opening a weekly training with people in the Los Angeles area or wherever close to where you live, or maybe even getting some Sunday hikes going there or something. This is all speculative. But if there were people, therapists, I guess, down in LA who were wanting to get together for some, weekly evening training, like our free groups at Stanford that Rhonda and I have, is that something that would interest you? And if so, where could they contact you? Well, not really, David. Tell them I don't want them to contact me.
Sure, I'd be really interested in doing that. But just to say, I've only been doing team CBT for about a year, so I'm not a trainer. I'm only level 1 certified and working on level 2. So I wouldn't want to misrepresent that I would be there to supervise or train anyone. I'm not at that level yet, but I would love to meet with people in some kind of peer consultation,
peer training, role-playing practice.
Absolutely, whether it's in the context of a hike or meeting at a coffee shop, I'd love to do that. And if there are people in the LA area, I'm in the San Fernando Valley, but you can contact me by email. Should I give my email address?
Yeah.
So it's drmichaeldg@gmail. So it's spelled out as drmichaeldg@gmail.com.
Great, and I'll put that in the show notes as well.
Terrific.
So, Rhonda, I always have to thank you. You're a gift from God.
Oh, gosh.
And you're just so wonderful, so supportive, so brilliant. You bring energy. You give your heart and soul to this. You're doing some new training now at Kaiser.
I'm doing
planning.
I'm doing one class at Kaiser. Yes.
And you just got back from training. What was in Indiana?
In India.
Oh, India! All the way to India.
Right.
With Heather Clegg and
Dipti Joshi.
Yeah, which was
we trained graduate and undergraduate psychology students.
Right.
And then we went to medical school and trained medical students, psychiatrists, and psychiatric residents.
And then you did some training for the Dalai Lama.
Then we and he's going to be on the podcast pretty soon. We're still working on that interview.
3 days with the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
How is he doing now?
People. He looks really great. He's sharp. He doesn't have any notes. He just talks brilliantly from, extemporaneously, and it's very moving.
And is there any overlap between what he's teaching and what we're kind of aiming for in team therapy?
Actually, I think that there is. The class I took talked a lot about emptiness, and that's the most difficult state to achieve, emptiness, and I think that really fits in with team CBT because it's letting go of all judgments and just staying clearly in the moment, not future tripping, not worrying about the past, but staying in the moment without distorting what's going on. And that's what
we were role-playing with Sally, to be empty rather than to be doing battle with the husband's criticisms, to receive it and to accept it. And then when you do that, it gets converted into something radically different, and that is a kind of mystical, spiritual occurrence.
Yeah. And one other thing that's similar, and that's kind of what you were talking about last week, Michael, is that there's a lot of, the Dalai Lama teaches about love and compassion. Yeah. And when you, like you talking about Cayenne and you, David, in the intensive when they were working with you, Michael gave you a lot of love and compassion. So even though you were facing your biggest fear, you felt safe enough to do this work in front of 100 people until the 100 other people, kind of dissolved.
Exactly.
Until you did your survey technique.
Right.
And that's been my experience of working with you too, David, is the amount of love and compassion that you give.
Yeah, and the self versus other distinction disappears.
Right.
That we saw that in the role play with Sally. See, she thinks the husband is other, who's attacking her, and she has to fix the other. And what we're really talking about is how Sally and her husband can be one.
Yes.
But those are fancy words, and if you haven't been there, you don't grasp what it means. So David's talking psychobabble now.
No, I mean, it really takes practice to get to that place.
Yeah.
Where you can let go of your own ego.
You say, yes, you're right, I'm failing you.
Yeah.
And you're together.
But you can't do it by rote. Like, I know I'm failing you. Like, that's what I did the first time when I felt I didn't do a good enough job.
It has to come
because
from the
it wasn't
heart.
Real.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're way over time, so thank you all for tuning in. Tell your friends if you like the podcast. If you have a mailing list, send out to them and say, listen to these Feeling Good podcasts, and give the link to my website to the page where it's the list of all the Feeling Good podcasts, and they can go there and start with number one or listen to any of them, and that really helps us out a lot.
Yes. And Michael, thank you for sticking around to do this podcast with us.
My pleasure. I enjoyed
Thanks
it very
for
much.
coming up and taking a day out of your life to hang out with us. It was sure fun. It's been a fast 24 hours.
Yeah, it's flown by. I enjoyed it very much.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.